let us talk about the stomach. So we're gonna go briefly over some of these things: the shape, the position, syntopy, and projections. And additionally, I'm also gonna talk about the parts, but we will see. So first thing to know is that it's an intraperitoneal organ. It's located between your esophagus and the duodenum. I'm sure you guys know this though. It has a J shape, as you can see, right? And a lesser curvature and the greater curvature. So now that we've understood a little bit about this, let's look at the parts. The beginning, where you'll see sort of the esophageal sphincter or the esophagus with it, is called the cardia. Then you have the top part, the fundus, the middle, the body, and then along the pylorus, sometimes you have another division that you see in some pictures, which is the pyloric antrum and the pyloric canal. But just know that they're broadly a part of the pylorus together, right? And I mentioned intraperitoneal organ. So those of you that already know what that means, that's amazing, as you should know, amazing. But if you don't know, let's talk a little bit about what it means if an organ is retroperitoneal or intraperitoneal. Normally and generally, if something is intraperitoneal, that means that it lies almost entirely covered in peritoneum, and that, which means like most of it is covered by peritoneum, and that you'll usually find a mesentery component to it. Like completely opposite to that, the retroperitoneal organs, which you can remember with a mnemonic sad pucker. I'm sure you will either come across it in the future or you may have already come across it. A retroperitoneal organ is actually covered only on one side or only very partly by peritoneum. So always good to know this. And a little bit about the anatomical position of the stomach. It lies superiorly, right? So it lies on the top part or aspect of the abdomen on your left side of the body. But if you see it according to the abdominal regions, which you can see in the left side picture here, as a lot of professors like to talk about it, or people from anatomy will talk about it, normally the stomach lies in the epigastric region. It can also overlap with the umbilical region and the left hypochondriac region, but all of these factors determining this are like based on the foods you've eaten, like how filled the stomach is, or if you are in respiration or not, or the size, shape, and position of the stomach just varies on you as a person. It's very individual. So that's that. And I'm not sure if this is completely part of this question, but it's always good to know this, at least for dissections, which is the layers of the abdomen. And from superficial to deep, you have the skin, then you have the campus and scarpus fascia, then you have a muscular layer with the muscles, you have the transversalis fascia, you have extraperitoneal fat, and the parietal peritoneum. Something really good to know is that when you describe layers or like parts of something or topography, it's always good to know if it's medial or lateral, if it's superficial or deep, where you're starting from. That's really key, because if you're just naming things randomly, it can give the professor an idea that you're not very clear on your knowledge or you're hesitating. So even then, even in general, always describe layers of something or parts of something like this as from like a good perspective, from direction, from like proper naming, right? Yeah. Now the infamous projections. If you see the orange triangle right there, that is your triangle of Labbé. It's a projection of your stomach. So again, a good way to describe where the stomach is located. And it's basically going to be a connection of the 9th rib cartilage on the right and then of the 8th rib cartilage on the left. But you don't have to remember it like that. Whatever way you choose to remember it is fine. Then you have the Desjardins point, and that's the green dot in the picture that says number 2. It's a projection of the major duodenal papilla of Vater, and it's basically connecting the umbilicus and the apex, right? If you see that line on there. And then you have Murphy's point. It's a projection of the fundus of the gallbladder, and it will show you an intersection of the right costal arch and the right mid-clavicular line. Mid-clavicular, so middle of clavicle. Always good to remember what the words mean, and then you can put things into perspective very easily. That's the blue point that we just covered, number 3. Then you have McBurney's point. Now, this is very interesting because you can sort of measure it yourself, right? You can locate it on yourself. Basically, it's 1/3 distance between your anterior superior iliac spine and then the umbilicus, right? And it's a projection of the origin of the vermiform appendix from the cecum. And then you have, lastly, the yellow point, Lanz's point. It is a projection of the vermiform appendix. As you can see, the comparison between points 4 and 5. 4 is kind of where it starts, where it originates, where it's coming out from. And 5 is sort of towards the end of it, where it's lying, where it's finishing. So that is usually in the pelvic cavity if it's in the pelvic position. If you've come across this before, the vermiform appendix has actually almost 4 to 5 positions, and it can be located differently in different individuals. So definitely study those variations. And it's at the border of the right and middle third of the interspinous line. So it's always good to know projections because they give you an estimation of, where is this thing roughly inside my body. So it's always good to have that reference point, and this is what these projections really serve as. Now, syntopy. So, what does syntopy really mean? It's sort of a position of an organ relative to some other organs, right? Or it's an anatomical relation, or it's what is lying nearby or next to this certain thing, or what's touching it in the body, or what's next to it. So it's really good to know syntopy because that means you're learning anatomy comprehensively. You know what's next to each other, not just memorizing, oh, this is here. You know it as relations, which is always going to pay off, right? So superiorly, you have the esophagus and the diaphragm. And then anteriorly, you have the greater omentum, you have the liver, gallbladder, the diaphragm. And about syntopy, different sources usually say different things, but it's always good to know from a few sources so that you have overlapping information. And the posterior anatomical relation is you have the pancreas, the left kidney, left adrenal gland, also known as your suprarenal gland. And you have the spleen, the splenic artery, transverse mesocolon, you have lesser sac. And some pictures from atlases will really give you a good look at this. So syntopy definitely helps with a lot of things, And that's all from my side.